Hey, everybody. Welcome to a bull session, or maybe it's a bat session, with a group of bat boys who are not exactly the traditional kind of bat boys you may have seen before. We're here to talk comic book geek about Batman, Batman Year One, The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller, and a host of a lot of really interesting subjects. I'm Michael Uslan. I'm the executive producer of the Batman films, from Batman to The Dark Knight Rises, and I'm here with a wonderful, wonderful group of guys. Dan DiDio from DC Comics, Denny O'Neil, writer extraordinaire and an editor too, somewhere on the side there, and Scott Snyder, who is now also, happy to say, a Batman writer at DC Comics. And I want to kick this off by throwing out this one, guys. What was the first moment that you discovered Batman, that Batman came into your life, and what was it about Batman, his origin story, that appealed to you, that turned you into a Bat fan? And I want to kick it off with Denny.
Curse you, Uslan. You're asking me to go back 60+ years. I can remember liking Batman when I was 5 or 6 years old. My father bought me one comic book a week after Sunday Mass, and where he was getting milk for the family, and he'd score a comic book for me. And then later I traded with the other kids on the street, going up and down with a little red wagon full of comic books. And it was a great deal, because, you know, an hour later you had 30 new comic books to read. And I remember being very fond of Batman and Superman, and interested when Batman took over the Superman radio show, which he did 2 weeks a year while the Superman actor...
Bud Collyer?
Bud Collyer,
yeah.
I guess, went on vacation. And then I didn't think about him until, I guess, the Adam West television show, when I was, you know, given a chance to write the character by Julie Schwartz. And then to put it mildly, I got deeply into it. Who knows why, when you're 6 years old, you love one comic book and not another. I loved the Vigilante, the backup character. I have no idea why.
Well, Dan, you're a different generation.
Oh, completely different. It's funny, you know, I started with the Batman TV show, the Adam West stuff. And my first reading for Batman was actually the card sets, the old painted card sets.
Oh, sure, I remember
from the
those.
60s. And I read them in the 80-page giants with Superman, Batman, and, you know, just a lot of things along those lines. So I was peripherally involved in it. You know, when you asked the question, I stopped to think to myself, I can't remember when I was first introduced to Batman's origin, because I was a fan of Batman without knowing his origin. I just knew the character, and there was something fun and exciting about him. But for me, I became a Batman fan. I give you 2 books, the 2 things that just came at me. They always stand out to me, and I always forget the one. It's the infamous Joker cover where he's holding up Batman 251, where I think it's the
Five-Way Revenge.
Five-Way Revenge was the first
Written by
Batman.
him.
I know it is, of course it is. And of course, that book was the first one I saw, and I had seen him in Brave and Bold, but the first time I bought a single Batman book was Five-Way Revenge, and it was spectacular. And luckily, the second one I bought was just a back issue, which was Night of the Reaper, which is still, without a doubt, probably the best Batman comic I've ever read to date. So those are 2 things that I always resonate with me. Then I started reading forwards, and I was, you know, in and out on occasions. And then once I started to get caught up in the lore and the history of the character, I started to really enjoy it. But the Batman, I always find, is the most amazing thing to me is about how flexible a character he is, and how he looks and can work in anything. So when you think about it, there's this big comedic version of Batman, or a lighthearted version of Batman in cartoons, and yet the thing that brought me into comics was nothing ever more serious. 2 of the most dangerous stories I've ever read. And that just shows you how flexible the character is, but how much he's likable.
Yeah, he's a great storytelling tool.
Yeah.
You know, Night of the Reaper is also one of my favorite Batman stories of all time, and it was interesting how it was worked into Batman Year 2.
Yes.
Later on. Another one I loved was, I'm thinking maybe it was Archie Goodwin, Night of the Stalker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where the whole episode takes place without one word of dialogue, just showing you how intense and powerful this character is, that you don't even need dialogue. Well, you're from a completely different generation, Scott. We've got the young Turk here.
We call them whippersnappers.
What got you into Batman? What made you fall in love with the mythos and everything that was Batman?
When I was a kid, I loved the TV show. It was on reruns on Channel 11 on WPIX here on Sundays, and I didn't realize it was campy, you know, because I was 7 or 8, I thought this is these epic battles between good and evil. I feel like I was lucky enough to grow up alongside Batman, and that my first, serious comics, the comics that really influenced me was Batman of the late 70s and then Batman of the early 80s. I remember being at a kind of time in my life when it was just a little bit more mature than I was, and I looked up to that element of it, the psychological complexity, when I was 12 or 13, of issues like the Dark Knight Returns and Year One and The Killing Joke sort of made me want to tell richer, better stories, or to find books that would speak to those sort of darker elements and impulses that would make me feel like I was reading stuff that was, one, like, forbidden, or too old, too dark for me, but on the other hand, there were just great character stories. He was always sort of just a little bit more grown up than I was ready for, and that always intrigued me. It's one of the joys of working on a character like that, that you make your own version of it and something that speaks to you now as a writer, but it's wonderful to know that there are all of these sort of multiple versions and points of access to him for readers of all ages.